hope.
Do you need a bottle of water or something like that?
No, I'll be fine. Thank you, though. Thank you. I'm in pretty good shape. All right. Are you sure you had all the buttons right? Because it should be up already.
No, they're off.
Should I turn it off? Okay. Okay, there we go.
Check 1, 2. All right, friends, should we get started? Good evening. It is such a delight to be able to gather here and to be inspired and learn with our esteemed guest, Dr. Gary Zola, one of my professors from Cincinnati that I'm so fond of and that I remember from many years. I don't know, I didn't say this to you since you've been in, but I remember when I was in high school and you took us to Plum Street and I was in the basement and all of the wonderful stories that you shared and just inspiration. And to be able to have you come and be with me here, with my new congregation here in Buffalo, New York, as our Judge Philip Halpern lecturer is really a privilege that I'm so grateful for. So first of all, welcome. I want to thank the Halpern family for providing us with this opportunity to bring lectures, to deepen our understanding, appreciation of our faith, of our background. Judge Halpern was especially interested in the civic life of our community and social justice and in the role that we as Jews have played and, God willing, will continue to play for many years in being able to shape the values, the culture, the sense of connection that we create wherever we go across different borders. And so I know that you're going to be sharing with us a little bit about that tonight. Dr. Gary Zola is the Executive Director Emeritus of the Jacob Rader Marcus American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's the largest repository of artifacts from American Judaism and a favorite faculty member of many, many years of both students at the Rabbinical School and the Graduate School in Cincinnati. I learned so much from him, and I look forward to learning much, much more. Thank you for being with us.
Wow, thanks for that warm welcome. Thank you. Oh my God, I can only go down from here. That's for sure. First of all, I just want to say a couple of words before I begin. It's really wonderful to be here, and I can tell you, it's not my first visit. I've been to Buffalo and to Bethzion on numerous occasions, and if you come while I'm speaking the rest of the weekend, you're going to hear this a few times. I am getting into the repetitive stage of life, but this I'm aware of. I think I may be the only Jew that exists in this world that for whom Buffalo is a romantic city, because my bride, who's going to be here in just a few minutes, of 40, oh, there she is, my beautiful bride, Steffi. She studied at the State University of New York, and I came to visit her, and that's the beginning of a 51-year romance. So Buffalo is a city I love to come to. So thank you for inviting me. I want to just say a couple of words before we get into our subject, because it's so important. First of all, I'm sure all of you, in one way or another, no matter what you do, can understand how rewarding and fulfilling it is to see someone who you've taught or mentored or has been someone you've tried to help and influence along the way when they were students, how after a decade or 15 years you see them, really in the fullness of a career. I don't mean to say that I deserve any credit for your rabbi's abilities, but it is so rewarding. In fact, for me, that's been one of the really high watermarks for the kind of rabbinate that I've had, that is to teach rabbis. I have the privilege of visiting so many congregations. Very often I see my own students, and to watch that happen is so rewarding. So Brent, it's really wonderful to be here with you, and I'll say more about the rabbinate tomorrow night. Also, I want to acknowledge that this Halpern lecture is something very important. You probably are aware, if not, you should be aware, that not all congregations have the amenity of being able to bring in scholars or people who've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time studying a subject and therefore can enrich the community. That's a gift. And so I'm very honored and grateful to be here and speak at this particular lectureship that the Halpern family started. Now tonight, I'm going to talk about a subject. You see the title. It was very rewarding because just before you arrived, the rabbi showed me a film, which I hope most of you have seen, about the history of the congregation and about Buffalo. Have you all, many of you seen it? At any rate, your rabbi said to me, he was on the film and he says, in the film, he says, you know, Jews have always played a leading role in advancing civil rights in the American nation. And then as he said that on the film, he turned to me and he said, you taught me that. And so that's where I'd like to begin. It really is a true statement if you think about it. One more word of the lay of the land. I have an affliction that so many of my colleagues have, and that is I tend to fill the sound of silence with my own voice. So if you want to ask a question, please just put your hand up. Don't wait to the end, because if you do that, it may be over before you get to ask your question. So just feel free. Whatever you want to ask, even if it's in the middle of something I'm doing, go right ahead, because whatever you want to ask is just as important as anything I had to say. So at any rate, think about this. You know, Jews have been here from before the Revolution, right? Jews lived in America from the colonial period. In fact, for extra credit, is there anybody in the audience who happens to know the first organized Jewish community, what year it was established in North America? Yes, sir, please. I can't hear you. Okay, you are dismissed because you get an A for that is correct, 1654, 23 Jews arrived in a city, you know it as New York, but it was New Amsterdam. So Jews have had an organized presence here since 1654. And in fact, Jill was talking to me at dinner, and we were talking about the history of Jewish life in America, and I was pointing out that there's always two phases to the organization of Jewish communities in America. There's the phase when individuals come to a community, but there's no community, and then there's the establishment of an organized community. So even though 1654 is when the first Jewish community was established in New Amsterdam, we have a document that proves there was a Jewish man walking around Roanoke Island, which is off the coast of North Carolina today, in the year 1585. My teacher, Dr. Marcus, used to say, so don't tell me about your pilgrim fathers. Compared to my people, they're Johnny-come-latelys. But the first organized community was, yes, please. Well, that's a trick question. That's a trick question. I'll tell you why. Because there's in the Southwest, you're always dealing with what's called crypto Jews, and that's a very do you all know what crypto Jews are? These okay. So crypto Jew is the technical word we use now for this idea that there were Sephardic Jews who came from Spain and Portugal, and they were driven out of practicing Judaism, but they did so secretly. And the whole field of crypto-Jewish studies is, it's always controversial. So I don't know, you could, if you say something like that, you could go, there was this supposedly non-Jewish guy by the name of Luis de Torres who was on the boat with Columbus. So, at any rate, it's difficult. But the fact is that, think about it, the Jews in those early days, in the colonial period, in the early national period, they were really the only empowered, if you think about it, group that could establish itself or assert itself on behalf of what you might call dissenting rights. Now, there were the Quakers, and they were sort of outsiders, right? But they were part of the Christian community. The black community, it was here and present, but they were not empowered. I mean, with rare exception, as a community, they were disabled. And women also were not on the same, they couldn't hold office, and they had many disabilities, but it's hard to argue that women were a minority. Whereas the Jews were really, in a sense, the first, if you will, identity group that existed in this new world to advocate on behalf of itself. And that's why the rabbi's point, in my opinion, and what I was taught and what I taught my students, is that our interest in a sense, religious freedom, but then that advocating for religious rights leading into minority rights, the rights for those who are small in number, has always been very great. If you were to ask me, as a student of the American Jewish experience, what is the greatest gift we've given to America? Some of you might say Hollywood. Some of you might say, some of you might say, Dr. Salk. Some of you, there's lots of things you could say. If you asked me that question, the answer would be that we have constantly been on the vanguard, on the point of the arrow, in advocating on behalf of enlarging human rights as a group. Another way of saying it is we have been leaders throughout the course of American history in compelling the nation to live up to the lofty ideals that have been expressed in its founding documents. Now, I've just said that, but a true scholar has to demonstrate it, okay? And so I am going to now try to prove to you with documents what I'm saying. So let's begin. This is a picture of Jonas Phillips. He was a very prominent Jew in Philadelphia in the late 18th century. He was the president of his congregation, and he writes a letter to the Constitutional Convention, which was taking place in Philadelphia, as you know, between May and September of 1787. And in that letter, he writes these words. He writes to his delegate from Pennsylvania, and he's asking that as they debate this constitution, this federal constitution that they are trying to create, he asks them to please make certain that religious freedom is given to the Jews. And in a famous line, which I've put up there in front of you, he says to his delegate in a letter, then the Israelites will think themselves happy to live under a government where all religious societies are on equal footing. I solicit this favor for myself, my children, and posterity, and for the benefit of all Israelites through the 13 United States of America. And what I want to point out to you is that line where he's asking for this, but he begins it by saying that all religious societies, in other words, that's a theme that I'm going to try to amplify tonight. It's not just give us equal footing, we'd like to create a world in which all are to receive the benefits we hope you will grant to us. Now, historians, American Jewish historians, argue that the American Jewish experience is an exceptional diasporic experience. Now, this exceptionality is different than exceptionalism with regard to America, when Americans speak about American exceptionalism. It's the same word, but it means something a little different to Jews. In terms of Jewish American exceptionalism, historians refer to it as this idea that in all of diaspora history, there has been no diaspora nation where Jews have fared as well as they have in the United States of America. That's been, up until recently, the argument that's been made. Okay? Now, the question is often asked, how do you substantiate such a statement? And so we'll go through it. They base this statement on these 4 ideas. That first, Jewish history in the United States begins before the country was born. And in fact, as I just pointed out, Jews helped to bring the nation into existence. Jews fought for the revolution. Jews lived here. Jews contributed financially. There is no such example of that in the diaspora besides the United States. So that's point 1. Point 2, Jews, as I mentioned, fought for American independence. They bore arms. They died. First Jew to die for American independence was a man by the name of Francis Salvador, who was killed in a skirmish in 1775, a year before the Declaration of Independence, outside of Charleston. Third, the Constitution, Mr. Jonas Phillips did not know this, but when Washington saw his letter, he didn't know this, but the Constitutional Convention had already debated that topic, and Madison and Jefferson won out over Patrick Henry, that this was going to be a nation where the Constitution would not disable the Jews religiously. That was the decision that was made. And so the Constitution, and in particular, of course, the Bill of Rights, makes it clear that all are given the right to practice their religion and have freedom of conscience. This is from the Bill of Rights. And finally, and this is very important to us today, the Constitution really doesn't mean anything. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow night too. Constitution doesn't mean anything unless you have an independent judiciary, which was built into the Constitution. And if there are any lawyers here, they can kind of make sure I'm saying this correct. But I do know this, that you can look at lots of very remarkable constitutions. I've seen the Constitution of the old Soviet Union, and there are many others, and they look on paper just as nice as ours. The problem is you can't fight City Hall there, right? You cannot, what is it called? The two beautiful words, due process, right? So, this is why this is such an important issue to so many people today, what's going on. But these elements have made it possible for Jewish life in the United States to be exceptional. Now, this, the Constitution, though, does not mention the Jew by name, and of course, or the word, and therefore we as a Jewish community, from the promulgation of the Constitution to the present, we have always taken the position that that makes it clear that we're not mentioned, but we assume that all the rights and immunities that come in the Constitution apply to us because we're not excluded. But that's not really a logical conclusion, right? And to this day, there are people who make the case that that's not what the founders had in mind. They didn't. This is the talk that comes from people who say, well, America, of course, is a Christian country, because the founders of the Constitution were thinking about the different denominations of Christianity. They certainly were not thinking about the 1,500 or the 2,000 Jews who lived here. Now, we as a Jewish community have always assumed that the non-mention of us entitles us to say that if I was a white Jewish landowner when the Constitution was adopted, that I would have the same rights and privileges as any other male white landowner. But how do I know that that's true? And so this has been a position that Jews have taken from the beginning to the present day, that the Constitution entitles us to these rights and emoluments. So the first idea that we have argued for in terms of civil rights is that we are Americans, and we are therefore entitled to all the privileges that any other American is entitled to, and that comes from the Constitution. Jewish citizens and Judaism possesses equal footing under the law. That's what we were promised. And the United States government must not advantage one religion over another. That has been our position. Second, as citizens of the U.S., Jews as individuals and Judaism as a religion, meaning as a religious conviction, are entitled to the full protection of American law wherever we are, here at home or abroad. That's important. Meaning, what if we find don't forget your question, what if we find ourselves living in a place that doesn't give its Jewish citizens the rights that American Jews have? We have taken the position that the United States of America, as citizens, our American citizenship supersedes, forgive me, supersedes the disabilities of any foreign country. And I'm going to talk about that. Yes, please.
With point number one, where the U.S. government must not advantage one religion over another, why then are Christian holidays legal holidays in this country, but Jewish holidays are not?
Well, first of all, that's an excellent question, and the reason it's such a great question is I know the answer. I think you're really talking about Christmas.
Christmas.
Christmas. And this has been, if you want, there's a great article explaining this by my teacher, Jonathan Sarna, and it goes something like this. Christmas is really the only such example, I mean, where it's an actual federal holiday, right? Because Easter is not. It's not a national holiday. I mean, we may be off for Easter and things like that, but it's Christmas that is a federal holiday. And the way it's explained, I'm just really summarizing Sarna's article, and is that there's really two holidays called Christmas. And they both have the same name. So there's the Christmas, which is the nativity and the birth of Jesus and the whole story that goes with that. The other is a social holiday called Christmas, which involves giving of gifts and goodwill towards all and so forth and so on. And they both have the same name. And the Christmas that is the federal holiday is not the religious holiday. It is the Christmas about goodwill and, sort of like the Thanksgiving kind of spirit that we all get into. And the other one is not what we're endorsing as a nation. Now, of course, you can see the problem with that whenever you go to a department store during the Christmas season, because as you get into the elevator, as you're walking along, you're going to hear chestnuts roasting on an open fire, being sung, followed by a Deste Fidelis. And so, it's impossible to separate these two, but that's the legal approach to it. Okay, did I do okay on that? All right. And by the way, thank you for your question, because it proves that I'm an honest Jew. That you interrupted my. You didn't interrupt. You asked the question while I was talking, and I answered it, didn't I? Okay. So there you are. That should encourage all of you to do the same thing. Now, the last is that since the U.S. Constitution itself argues for a delicate balance between majority rule and inalienable rights that the Constitution secures for all of its citizens and cannot be voted away. The only way to vote them away is to change the Constitution. Then that means that American Jewry has always been particularly and keenly interested in preserving this balance between minority rights and majority rules, because there's always that gray area, which, of course, we're living in a very colorful time with regard to that. Theoretically, there's an election anywhere, and people vote, and the majority should win. They should get the candidate that the majority voted in. However, the Constitution says you cannot vote to prohibit someone from practicing openly his or her religious tradition. That's a principle of the Constitution. To do something like that, a vote like that, would be unconstitutional. Now, the independent judiciary makes those decisions, hopefully, and but what I'm trying to say is that Jews have been on the forefront of this issue, trying to guard and be cognizant of this delicate balance, and always siding, as a generalization, with minority rights, not to let majority trample the minority. So these three ideas grow out of this exceptionalism that American Jews have felt, that has come to them through the fact that we've been here from before the nation, that we fought for the nation's beginning, that the Constitution gives to us, and finally, the idea that we have this right to pursue legally our what we consider to be our rights. Now, the rest of my time with you, I'm going to try to prove to you with documents that what I'm telling you is meritorious. It's not just make-believe, it's not what I think, it's based on historical precedent or documents. So now let's begin. Let's begin with this document. I am proud of this document. I found this document when I was doing my PhD 40 years ago. And by the way, there's anybody under 15 in this room, or even 20, I had to read through all the Charleston Press myself. I didn't have the benefit of digitization. And I came across in this newspaper in Charleston, and as you can see at the bottom, it's from 1827. And I was studying, because my first book, my dissertation was on Charleston Jewry, and I see the name G.P. Cohen in the newspaper, and since I'm such a clever, bright young man, I figured that sounds like a Jewish name. And so I read this article, and I said, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And I took a picture of it, and I've been teaching from this one little document my whole career, and just recently, about 5 years ago, I published it in a collection of documents so other people could use it. Now, since it's on the screen and you don't have it in front of you, I'll read it because it's worth reading out loud. It starts, to the public, having had a dispute with Dr. Edward Chisholm and feeling myself insulted by an illiberal expression made by him, I applied to a gentleman of respectability and honorable feeling to call on Dr. Edward Chisholm and to demand an apology. If this was not promptly given, then to demand the only redress that honor has long established as practice in these cases. Anybody know what's going on? A duel. Okay, so we have the prolegomenon, which is Mr. Cohen's been insulted by Dr. Chisholm. He's asked for an apology through an intermediary, and he says, if you're not going to apologize, I want a duel. Now, listen up. Dr. Chisholm, through his friend, answered that he would give me no satisfaction, and that I was not on an equal footing with him because I was a Jew. Nor did he conceive any Jew to be on a footing with him. As such a subterfuge as this marks the individual not only with illiberality and ignorance, but with cowardice, it is therefore becomes my painful duty to intrude these remarks on the public in order to expose him to the community in which I live, the place of my nativity. So Mr. Cohen is not only not going to get a duel, he has been told through the intermediary that I don't owe you a duel because you're not my equal. You're a Jew. And the man has the audacity to go beyond that and to say, no Jew is equal with me. This is 1827. So Mr. Cohen has no alternative but to take and buy an ad in the paper and to expose this gripe to the public. And then he lectures to Chisholm in the last paragraph, and this is so impressive. At this time, there may have been maybe 3,000 Jews in all of the United States of America at this time. We were 0.01% of the population. And this is what Cohen says in the newspaper. He says, the Constitution of the United States and of my native state, South Carolina, give me, note this, and every citizen of every religious denomination, equal rights and equal privileges. Religious distinctions are not known in this country. That's, of course, a problematic statement because he wouldn't have to write that if it wasn't the problem. Religious distinctions are not known in this country. Members of the same community are valued only according to their conduct in life, and none but a bigot and a coward like Edward Chisholm would attempt to insult a whole nation by refusing that satisfaction which every gentleman is ready to give and receive. These are your predecessors. These are the people who have fought for the rights that were handed to us in the cradle. The Constitution says one thing, but Dr. Chisholm says something else. And you see that he relies on the Constitution. And you also see in this document that he doesn't just say, no, a Jew is every bit as good as anybody else. He also points out that in this country, it's not just the Jew, but every minority is entitled to this respect.
I dared you and challenged you to organize so that the people, if not the president, would drive the money changers from the temple, and you did it. You appreciate the fact, my dear friends, that among other things in the National Union for Social Justice, we are Christian insofar as we believe in Christ's principle of love your neighbor as yourself, and with that principle, I challenge every Jew in this nation to tell me that he does not believe in it.
Anybody know who that man was? Yes, please. Well, Charles Coughlin, but I mean, excellently done. Did you want to?
I want to interject something.
Yes, please.
I came to you from Metro Detroit, where Father Copeland was from. Church is a little louder.
What? Yes. It's close. Close. What is it? It's it's close. You're close.
So we were talking about scouting earlier. My daughters in Girl Scouts were invited to an interfaith service at that church.
Oh, really?
I wasn't a good enough student because I didn't pick up on it.
Oh.
I was asked because they knew I was a rabbi to speak and offer a blessing. And I went up and I did it. And I come off the lectern and one of the ladies of the church comes up to me and says, "Rabbi, thank you so much. You're the first rabbi who's been willing to come and speak here."
Oh, really? Well, that's good. That's good that you did. Well, yes, you really summarized it very well, and so I'm now jumping from the 19th century, the early 19th century. I'm jumping to the 20th century with a media document, and this is a clip from 1937 where he's speaking at a large rally. Coughlin, by the way, there's two excellent books on Father Coughlin, and in the first many years of my teaching, I used to meet people. I don't know if there's anybody here who remember. He used to have an afternoon radio show on Sundays, and people would testify to me how upsetting and frightening it was to listen to him. He used to say he had nothing against Judaism or Jews. It just, according to Father Coughlin, that almost all the Jews in America were communists and were, advocating on behalf of communism. At any rate, he was really a boogeyman, and he, one of the things that he was trying to do was to constantly say, well, there's Americans and then there's Jews. In other words, he would separate this idea that we were part of the public, a portion of the people. This was a popular trend in the 30s. So what I want to do is give you another example of how the Jew asserts civil rights in the face of someone like Father Coughlin. And here I'm going to bring to you a very important figure, Rabbi Stephen Wise. Now, I would like to tell you about how the American Jewish Archives acquired these recordings of Stephen Wise, but I won't have time to do that, so you can come up to me later. But let me just say that you're listening to voice that has been brought back to life digitally. It's over 80 years old. And this is Stephen Wise, you know, one of the great, most dynamic rabbis of the 20th century, a national figure. And his congregation, which was called the Free Synagogue, they met every Sunday at Carnegie Hall. That's where they had their services. And Wise delivered his oratory at Carnegie Hall. Wise, just so you know, died in 1949, so that'll give you an idea of, you know, he was prominent from about 1910 to his death. And he gave several sermons that I have, the audios, of responses to Coughlin's radio. And by the way, Wise's often was recorded, his sermons, and then carried to the broadcasting station and then played back over the broadcasting station, which is how we have these recordings. So listen to Stephen Wise address Coughlin and pay close attention to how he battles back on what Coughlin just said.
Coughlinism is the deadliest form of anti-Semitism in America today. And it is that because it is anti-democratic, because it is as anti-Semitism always is anti-American. Evasions, sophistications will not answer the charge. Coughlinism is another name for anti-democratic, anti-American, anti-Semitism. Coughlinism resorts to a cheap and contemptible trick which must not deceive and entrap the unwary. Coughlinism lifts up its voice not to condemn, not to protest, but to explain, to argue, to extenuate. True Coughlinism has not explicitly and frankly defended anti-Semitism or Nazism in Germany. It would if it dared. If it dared to affront the conscience of American mankind, it would. It lacks the courage of such unpopular convictions as it has. It implies there is or there may be an excuse for Hitlerism. That excuse is communism. Communism and its menace, and Jews, he adds or implies, are or were the communists in Germany. For the Jew, Coughlinism is a regrettable phenomenon. For the Catholic Church, it is a disaster. But above all, it is America's shame.
So you see how Wise sets this up. He says, anybody like Coghlan who attacks the Jews and says what he's saying, he's not the patriot. Because what Coghlan is doing, says Wise, is anti-American, it's anti-democratic, it's anti-constitutional. And this is an example of how, again, the Jews use the Constitution, use their time in America to argue back against those who would portray them as outsiders. Now let's go to the second point, which is Jews as citizens of the U.S. are entitled to full protection under the law anywhere in the world. For time, I could give you so many examples of this. I mean, in a certain sense, you know, the fact that today we feel, or many of us feel, that we're perfectly entitled to argue on behalf of the State of Israel as American Jews and to press our nation to be supportive of the State of Israel is part of this story. But I want to go back earlier to a document that has to do with one of the great philanthropists in America, Jacob Schiff. You know, Schiff was a financier in the late 19th, early 20th century. He died, I believe, in 1920, something like that, 1919. I love to bring this document that the premier of Russia, a man by the name of Sergius Witt, wrote in 1909 after he had a meeting with Jacob Schiff. And you see from the beginning line in this document, Witt says, I had never before met a Jew like Schiff. In other words, he's a Russian, you know, aristocrat, you know, and he'd never met a Jew like Schiff. And he says, proud, dignified, conscious of his power, he declared to me solemnly that as long as the Tsar's government would continue its anti-Jewish policy, he would exert every effort to make it impossible for Russia to get a kopeck from the United States. See? And Sergius Witt is basically saying, you know, the Jews I meet in Russia don't talk like that. See? And so Jacob Schiff was, in this period of time, he was actively involved in literally trying to destroy a treaty between the United States and Russia, and Tsarist Russia, because of the brutal treatment that the Tsar was imposing upon Jews, starting with the Kishinev pogroms and going right on through, even before that. Many of our relatives came to this country as a result of that unpleasantness, that brutality, mine as well. And so he and many others who were like-minded organized an organization that some of you may have heard of or maybe even belong to, which is called the American Jewish Committee. And the American Jewish Committee's very first initiative, among its first initiatives, was to try to bring to an end the treaty that made for exchange of goods between Russia and the United States because of the treatment that the Jews were receiving. And so this eventually in 1911 makes its way to Congress, this effort to bring the treaty to an end. And as you can see, in December of 1911, this is 2 years after what I just showed you, that document, there is a hearing on this matter, and many prominent Jews come to testify at this congressional hearing, And you can see some of their names. And of course, among them was this very prominent and powerful Jacob Schiff. And I don't have a recording of this, but we do, of course, have the constitutional record. And I just want to read for you, listen to these words that he speaks about the rights of Jews because of American Jews to advocate on behalf of Jews in other parts of the world. And don't let that fall off your mind so quickly as if this is a common feature. In other words, just think to yourself, how many Russian Jews would go to the Tsar and ask the Tsar to help the Jewish community of Finland, or the King of England, or anywhere else? This is an idea that we take for granted as Americans. We sort of are used to that idea that we are citizens and therefore we can ask the government, our government, because we're a portion of the people, to promote ideas that are important to us, and that is that we want to see our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world treated fairly. This is not something we should assume every Jewish community has that right. Of course, Israel has assumed, the state of Israel has assumed a big role in that today, but prior to 1948, this was unique. Listen to what he says. He says, as he's finishing his address to Congress, he says, "Now, gentlemen, this is a chestnut that has come down through the centuries. This question has always been in the same position at the end of every administration. Every administration has claimed that it has done the best that was practicable, but that has not been the case. The best that was practicable was never done, and whatever has been done has not been done at the time it should have been done. And the best that is practicable is to honor and vindicate the dignity of American people as against Russia and all that Russia stands for." Gentlemen, just think of this. If any of you may happen to confess the Jewish faith, any American who accidentally was born of Jewish parentage wants to go to the Far East today and wants to take the shortest route, he takes the Trans-Siberian Railway, which means he's going to go through Russia. And when he comes to the Russian border, he's told, "Sorry, no thoroughfare." Now just think of it, gentlemen. Just think of what that means to be an American. In 1914 or 15, our Panama Canal will be completed. That great contribution which the American people are making to civilization and to the civilized world, that will then be open to the commerce of the world. Let us suppose that a Russian steamer comes to the gates of the canal and may be told, "You cannot pass through." What a howl there would be on the part of the civilized world. You see the simile? Are you going to stand for this? Gentlemen, I have finished, and I have only this to beg of you in conclusion. I have little fear that a committee composed of, as this committee is composed of, high-minded men, of what the report of this committee will be. But if you wish to vindicate the dignity of this Congress, the dignity of the American people, then make your vote unanimous. And they succeed in terminating this treaty that year, and President Taft signs that legislation. This was the first major legal victory of the American Jewish Committee. My point again is this is one of many examples of how Jews will go to the American government not only on behalf of their rights here in this country, but also abroad. And finally, I'm going to conclude with something we could talk about for several sessions, and that is this balance between minority rights and majority rules. And of course, one of the most colorful and important illustrations of this has to do with our interest in the 20th century in asserting and trying to, many Jews, not all Jews, but many Jews fighting the post-World War II battle for civil rights. I want to go back to Stephen Wise because it's such a treasure to hear such a document. Stephen Wise, a great orator, in 1940, he reads this book, Native Son. I was required to read this book in high school. Did any of you read this book? Okay, so would somebody quickly try to summarize the book for the audience so that everybody will understand what Stephen Wise is saying? It's not that difficult. Anybody remember the book? Yes, Brent, please.
African-American man on the south side of Chicago is hired by a wealthy family in northern Chicago and accidentally kills by smothering, I think.
That's right.
The daughter of the family and decides to hide to destroy her remains in a coal.
Right.
In the basement. And then much of the book, after he's found out, after a search, is the trial of this young black man and what happens to him.
That's exactly right. And just to, excellent. You see what an outstanding student is. He must have had a fantastic teacher. And then it goes further because the lawyer in the book who is defending the main figure's name is Bigger Thomas. And a lot of the book is, it's by the famous African-American novelist Richard Wright, and part of it is trying to show how, this man's life is, in a sense, tormented and twisted because of how he's, the disabilities that he, as a black young man, is facing in life. And then a good chunk of the book is all about this lawyer who's trying to get him off of a death sentence in the court. And at one point in the book, Richard Wright puts in the mouth of the Jewish lawyer, this is a novel, and he puts these words in, he says, of course I'm the public defender of this man. He says, because those who assign me to this case know that if there's anything that's going to seal this man's fate, it's having a Jewish lawyer defend him. Meaning that if there's anybody who is hated as much as the black man, it's the Jew. So Stephen Wise reads this in 1940. Now think of this. This is 1940. It's 14 years before Brown versus Boards of Education. He reads this book and he decides he's going to speak about it to his congregation. You're going to hear just a clip of what Stephen Wise says. Listen to this.
To me, as I read Native Son, the word and the mind and the understanding and compassionate soul of the Jewish lawyer became to me at one and the same time symbol, rebuke, prophecy, challenge. Symbol of what the Jew should be and do in relation to other races that are oppressed and ground into the dust. And I remembered the very sage and shrewd observation personally made to me a generation ago by Israel Zengin, and repeated in one of his last volumes. If only the Jews could forget their own fate, however bitter, and remember and try to better the fate of another, some alien race, such as the Negro race. After all, we Jews, as no other people, we know the heart of the oppressed. And I can't help saying to you, if there be any Jews in this congregation today who hail from the South, They are likely profoundly to disagree with me, but I must speak the truth as I see it. The indifference of the Jew, child of 35 centuries of civilization, his own. The indifference of the Jew throughout the country, save for rarest exceptions, to the fate of the Negro race is deeply dishonoring to the Jew.
I just want to point out to you, before it ends, that, I mean, listen to what he's saying. He says, if there are Jews from the South in this congregation, you're not going to agree with what I say, but I have to say it because it's what I believe. And then he says, it's our obligation. Who understands the heart of the stranger better than the Jew, he says. Now, this is 14 years before Brown versus Board of Education, and he's preaching to 3,500 people, but probably more because they'll hear it on the radio. And then he says directly, by the way, this is just me. I'm not your rabbi, but this is the ability of a rabbi to go into a pulpit and to say what the rabbi believes is so important. And if congregations today will not grant that freedom, then what they're only going to get is pap, meaning they'll only be able to listen to something that everybody says that's true, meaning be good people. So this is a side issue, but it's important to me because we don't want rabbis who deliver pap. We want rabbis who make us think and challenge us. At any rate, he says to this community, he says it directly, he says, I think, he says, that the fact that so many Jews seem to be indifferent to the plight of the African American, it's shameful, he says. And listen to now what he says, how he ends.
I feel a double obligation to every oppressed race and to every wronged man on earth. For I am an American and I am a Jew. All I can say to you as I close.
I'm going to go on because of our time, but, I love that line. He says, I feel a double obligation to every oppressed man anywhere because I am an American and I am a Jew. Wise did this. I've studied him a great deal, and that was his language. In other words, he didn't say, I'm an American Jew, I'm a Jewish American, or what. He would say, these are both my religions. American democracy is my religion, and Judaism is my religion. He said that again and again. Now, because of time, I just want to go on. When Dr. King inaugurated the civil rights movement, of course, is catapulted to fame in the Montgomery bus boycott, then in the 1950s, late 1950s, right after the boycott in 58, he begins to speak at all sorts of different places, including synagogues. And we have, at the American Jewish Archives, at least 3 recordings, voice recordings of Dr. King speaking in American synagogues. So King has a sense from his own studies. He was a very highly educated man who had studied way beyond his own religious tradition. He had a sense that particularly liberal Judaism was a group that he could reach. And he begins to establish friends with rabbis. And he slowly begins to draw the Jewish community, especially from the liberal side of the Jewish community, into the movement. And he senses and he speaks about the fact that the Holocaust, which had happened a few years before, is going to make a big difference in helping the Jew understand why action has to be taken now. And so I want to focus for a moment on this man.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generation of forebears before us done time and again down through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
This was Governor Wallace's inaugural address in January of 1963. And before I conclude, I just want to show you that not only was it the rabbis in the North who begin to exert themselves on behalf of the minority rights of others, but even rabbis in the American South, which is so dangerous, could cost them their lives. You all know the story of Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, so it's not make-believe. This was dangerous. Oh, many, many temples were bombed. I give a whole talk on that. So I want to bring you to this man. This is Rabbi Grafman. Listen to how he responds. Just a few days later, he writes a response to Governor Wallace's address with 12 other ministers. You can see that of these 12, 2 are rabbis. I'm sure you won't find it hard to believe that the ratio is not compatible with the ratio of religious life in the state of Alabama. And Grafman publishes a very moderate statement about how he is sad to see these other religious leaders as well, that the governor, instead of using the inaugural address to try to bring people together, he uses the inaugural address to separate people. And this provokes a backlash in his congregation. So listen to what happens the following Friday after that article is published.
You either believe in the Father with a God or you don't. You either believe in the brother with a man or you don't. You either believe in the 10 Commandments or you don't. You either believe in love or you don't. You either believe in justice or you don't. But you don't hypocritically say you believe it. And go to church or synagogue and pray about it. And then, if your minister dares to sign his name to a statement such as appeared in the papers yesterday, or raises his voice against the injustices of any people, see to it that he gets his walking papers.
He had been in that pulpit for about a decade. No, but they tried. They tried. And here's another example of Grafman's stubbornness. If you study the letter from Birmingham, you know, Grafman was in Birmingham, Alabama, and if you study the letter that Dr. King wrote from the Birmingham jail, he addresses it to not to come and have a march at this time. Grafman was one of them. So little children read and they see that these are the people that Dr. King was writing to, they must have been opposed to civil rights. But this is not true. I'll prove it to you. When Grafman hears in 3 months later in September, when those 4 children, the little girls, were killed by the KKK in the 16th Avenue Baptist Church, you know, when the KKK bombs the church, Grafman, at the High Holy Days, he speaks to his congregation. Now, I have to preface this by saying, in contrast to Buffalo, where I'm sure there's a full turnout of the congregation every single Friday night, I have to inform you that in most Jewish congregations, in the High Holy Days, lots of people come that don't come regularly. And so he's now speaking to a group of people who are not his regulars. And this is only days after those girls were killed, just a few days, Rosh Hashanah. And listen to what he says. They were just buried the day before Rosh Hashanah. Very briefly.
Where were you yesterday afternoon at 3:30? I'll tell you where I was. I was the 6th Avenue Baptist Church, Negro. I was at that funeral. I'm no hero. Anybody knows me, I'm no hero, I'm no martyr. I don't want to get killed, I don't want to have this temple bombed, and I don't want my home bombed. 4 children had been brutally killed. All we wanted to do was to go there and express our grief and our sorrow, to show these Negro families that we felt the depth of their sorrow, we shared it. All we wanted to do was to say to the Negro community, you're not alone. There are white people. This was all.
So these are documents that are aimed at showing you that the Jews, not all, not every Jew, but many have exerted themselves. So I've shown you first how the Constitution was used to force people to live up to the wording of the Constitution. I've shown you how Jews argued that American citizenship entitles them to advocate on behalf of Jewish concerns in America and beyond America. And finally, I'm showing you just examples, mostly from the 20th century, but I could show you 19th century examples, if we had more time, of how Jews advocate for the rights of others, because minority rights is important to the Jew for obvious reasons. But I want to share one little thing that I once was teaching this in a confirmation girl, to a confirmation class long ago, and this young woman put her hand up, and when I was saying, you know, Jews have a vested legal interest in making sure that minority rights are preserved, because if the minority rights of others are preserved, then it benefits us in return. And then she said to me, well, Rabbi, she said, don't you think the Torah has anything to do with this? So I've never failed, since that question was posed, to remind us that somehow we ought to also remember there's an ethical tradition that works its way here. It's not just a matter of quid pro quo, right? We benefit we work for civil rights just because by doing such a thing we're worried about ourselves only. That's a part of it, but there's also the ethical tradition that should be brought in. I'm going to end now with what is the apex of this last point that I was making. And I saw in the film that that you have here for the synagogue that the rabbi showed me, and there's a little clip of Rabbi Joachim Prinz in there. And let me tell you, for all of you who don't know, I want to play this whole clip for him. Joachim Prinz was born in Germany, was educated in Germany, and was ordained a rabbi in Germany. And he was expelled from Germany in 1937, and he comes to America, and he becomes a protege of Stephen Wise. And he throws himself under the tutelage of Wise into civil rights, just like you heard. And eventually, after Wise dies, this German Jewish immigrant, who, as a result of the Nazis, was forced to leave his homeland, becomes a very prominent leader. He had a congregation in Newark, New Jersey, but he eventually will become the president of the American Jewish Congress. And in the presidency, he guides the Congress to become, in the 1950s and 60s, very active in the civil rights movement. As a result of that, Dr. King invites Joachim Prinz to be one of the speakers. You know, there were two rabbis who spoke at the March on Washington. One gave a prayer, but Dr. Prinz actually delivers a speech. And many people don't know about this because, of course, Dr. King's speech was so ethereal and so magisterial that it sort of knocks everything that happened that day out of the park and away, and it's the focus on Dr. King's, rightfully so, is remarkable talk. But I do want you to hear what Dr. Prinz says. These are some pictures. This is Dr. Prinz as a young man. This is the group of people who were part of the sponsorship of the March on Washington. They all gathered with Dr. King, Walter Reuther from the AFL-CIO, Dr. Prinz you see there, Bayard Russell, and other prominent religious leaders. They go that day to see President Kennedy and Vice President Johnson, and there you see Kennedy and Dr. Prinz, and right next to Dr. Prinz is Martin Luther King. This is a recording of exactly what Dr. Prinz says at the March on Washington.
American Jew. Our fathers taught us thousands of years ago that when God created man, he created him as everybody's neighbor. Neighbor is not a geographic term. It is a moral concept. It means our collective responsibility for the preservation of man's dignity and integrity. Our Jewish historic experience of 3,500 years began with slavery and the yearning for freedom. I was the rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime. I learned many things. The most important thing that I learned in my life is that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problems. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. A great people which had created a great civilization had become a nation of silent onlookers. They remained silent in the face of hate in the face of brutality, and in the face of mass murder. America must not become a nation of onlookers. America must not remain silent, not merely Black America, but all of America. It must speak up and act, from the president down to the humblest of us, and not for the sake of the Negro, not for the sake of the Black community, but for the sake of the image, the dream, the idea, and the aspiration of America itself. Our children, yours and mine, in every school across the land, every morning pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, and then they, the children, speak fervently and innocently of this land as a land of liberty and justice for all. The time, I believe, has come to work together, for it is not enough to hope together, and it is not enough to pray together. To work together, that this children's oath pronounced every morning from Maine to California, from north to south, that this oath will become a glorious, unshakable reality in a morally renewed and united America. Thank you.
So as you can see, the American Jewish Archives possesses the Joachim Prinz collection, and this recording is part of it. So I'm going to end. Now you know why I'm often called at HUC the late Rabbi Zola. I've run a little longer than I had intended, but I still see the whites of your eyes. So you know, I was one of those children in school at the time that Prinz is talking about that. And I did sit there like many of you and recite those words. And over the 4 decades that I've been teaching this material, I really can't think of a time when the lessons of the past are more relevant and more pressing than the times in which we find ourselves. And I think if you, you know, whatever your perspective is, you cannot deny that I've tried to demonstrate, hopefully persuasively, that our forebears exerted themselves under very difficult conditions often to fight for our rights as Jewish citizens of this nation, to fight for our ability to benefit our brothers and sisters elsewhere in the world. And also, they were also from the beginning, if you remember that first document I showed you, attuned to the idea that those, the minority rights that are promised to us in this nation are worth fighting for. And this is a legacy that has been given to us, and I think we should all be mindful of how important it is to preserve our heritage and to teach it to future generations. It's a heritage we have in which we should take a great deal of pride. So I want to thank you for your very kind attention. It was a pleasure to be here.
You made it within, I think, 3 minutes before our live stream cuts off when it's automatically scheduled to stop. So thank you. I mean, this just encapsulates so much of what I love soaking up from every one of your lectures. And to be able to have it put before us so plainly what it is that we inherit from those that came before us in America is truly a gift that inspires us, that gives us strength to move forward. We're really lucky. We're going to have Dr. Zola with us through Shabbat. He will be offering our sermon tomorrow night, by the way, also celebrating new members of Temple Beth Zion tomorrow, and we'll have some guests with us from Hillel of Buffalo as well. I'm hoping the topic hasn't changed. Dr. Zola's topic here for tomorrow night will be Inheriting the Past and Bequeathing the Future, the Significance of Temple Beth Zion's 175th anniversary. He'll also be leading us in Torah study, and we should see him during services too. So thank you again, Dr. Zola. So glad to have you here. And thank you as well to all of you who came out, and to the Halpern family who provided that we have this opportunity to bring scholars such as Dr. Zola to enrich the life of our community. Thank you, everyone. Good night. There are some goodies, there's some wine, there's some fruit. Stay, nosh, schmooze, mingle, do what we do.
All right. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. All right. Gotta shut this all down.